Okay, so we're going to be talking about the path of the blood to the circulatory system, to the cardiovascular system. So we have the generally the basic is, I'll go into more details later, but general basic is the deoxygenated blood is representing blue, and oxygenated blood is representing the red arrows. So we're gonna start with the right side. So blood is coming from the upper body, like the head and the arms, via the superior vena cava right here. And then we have from the deoxygenated blood coming from the trunk area and the legs, basically lower heart, via the inferior vena cava into the right atrium. Okay. And from the right atrium, it passes through this valve. This valve is called the tricuspid valve. It's called tricuspid valve because it has three flaps that open and close, basically allowing blood flow from the right atrium to the right ventricle. And then from there, from the right ventricle, the oxygenated blood is pumped through the pulmonary valve into the pulmonary trunk, and then it splits to the pulmonary artery. So we have the left side, left pulmonary artery, which goes to the right, no, the left lung, and then we got the other one that goes to the right lung, the right pulmonary artery goes to the lungs, and to the lungs, when it reaches it carries carbon dioxide, and in the lung it disposes of those carbon dioxides and gets oxygen, because of the cells need oxygen. So it gets the oxygen and it returns it back to the heart via the right pulmonary vein and the left pulmonary vein. So it comes in here, in right here, into the left atrium. From the left atrium, we pass the bicuspid valve, is or also known as the mitral valve. This is called a bicuspid valve because it has two flaps, unlike the tricuspid that has three. Goes from there into the left ventricle. Number 4, from the left ventricle, it then passes the aortic valve into the aorta. This is the aorta. I just remember this because it's shaped like an A for aorta. And then from there, this oxygen-rich blood is then distributed to the rest of the body. The upper body, it separates into 3 arteries, going to the head and the arms. And then it basically loops behind the heart. We can see it, but it loops behind the heart. And it goes all the way down and it goes to the lower body, the trunk and the legs. And it supplies oxygen. This rest oxygen blood supplies oxygen to the rest of the lower body. With that, I'm just gonna talk about the importance of having valves. So the the cardiac circulatory system uses, even the blood vessel, they uses valve. These valves are basically used to prevent, so we have 4 valves. These valves are basically used to prevent the, backflow of blood. So the way this happen is due to contraction and relaxation of the ventricles and the atriums. So with the so first, what happens, we're just gonna focus on the left side, the right side. So first, the atrium collapse, basically contracts, and when the atrium contracts, the ventricles relax, and then vice versa, when the ventricles contracts, the atrium will relax. This causes blood to flow through the heart. So basically, pressure in the heart chamber rises and falls with constriction and relaxation of the atria and ventricles in order to like pump blood. So when the atria fills up with blood, the pressure in the atria is greater than that of the ventricles here. So basically this causes, the blood to flow into the ventricles. And most of the time, 70% of the blood flows from the atria into the ventricle before the atria even constrict. So, and then the pressure in the atria, rises, which cause it to constrict, and then it forcing the remaining of blood to enter into the ventricle. And that happens too with the right side, but I'm just focusing on one side. Basically, it's the same thing. And then when after the ventricle has, a lot of blood, when the ventricle contract, the pressure inside them, increases sharply, and it causes the valve here, the pulmonary valve, or it could be this one too, but I'm just focusing on this side, to open. When the pulmonary valve open and the ventricles contract, pushes blood into here, and then we have these fiber-like things called the chordal tendinae, and the chordal tendinae prevent the backflow of blood through the valve, and then the blood is pushed out of the ventricles, and then the pressure drop, and then the ventricle relaxes. And then when the ventricle pressure is lower than the blood pressure in the aorta and pulmonary trunk, these valves close. And this valve opens, and then the process begins all over again. So yeah, that's how that works. And to talk about the percentage of blood in the system, because it's not all equal always. Some part of the system, circulatory system, cardiac system, blood are found most of the time versus the other ones. So for like the systematic venous system, just basically outside of the heart area. That's where you will find 64% of blood distribution. This is including the venules and the median-sized veins, which is like 25% of that. The large veins and the venous network hold the blood is distributed about 39% of the time. The heart, the blood is actually distributed in the heart 7%, so it doesn't stay long in the heart area. Blood doesn't stay long in the heart. And then the systemic artery system, it's 13% blood distribution. This includes the aorta, the arteries, and and then we have the pulmonary circuit, which is basically involving the lungs. That is 9% blood distribution. This includes all the arteries and the capillaries and veins associated with the lungs. And then just the systemic capillaries are 7% blood distribution. And then to answer the questions in the back, the first question asks about, I'm just going to read the first question. The mitral regurgitation is a heart condition that occurs when the mitral valve does not close fully. Based on your knowledge of the heart, describe what happened to the blood of someone who has this condition. So yeah, going back to the mitral valve right here. And we do know that the purpose of this valve, or the function, is to prevent the backflow of blood. So yeah, when this is not working, it's not able to close properly, we will get backflow. And this could probably be found by listening to the heart and hearing a murmur. But yes, if the backflow of the blood is going backwards, which we do not want, this will be the cause of this not working. This condition, the mitral regurgitation, can lead to shortness of breath, fatigue, lightheadedness, and fluttering heartbeat. And then the second question, when you place your hand over your heart, you use your right hand. This is because you feel your heart more strongly on the left side of your chest, even though the heart is centered in the chest cavity. Why do you feel your heart beat more strongly on the left? Well, the left ventricle of your heart is larger and thicker than the right. We know that. And you feel your heart beat more strongly on the left side of your chest, even though the heart is centered in the chest cavity, because the left side of your chest has to pump the blood farther. So the left side pumps the blood to your head and all the way to your legs, throughout the whole body. So it has to go farther and against a higher pressure, versus the right side, it only has to go to the lungs, and the lungs are relatively close to the heart. So there's not that much work. And also, if you look at the diagram of the heart, the is slightly tilted to the left side as well. That's something interesting I just found out. And then the last question, ventricular septal defect. So basically this defect is when the septum, which is labeled E, mostly finding infants, but it could be developing adulthood as well. But it's mostly finding infants when this is not, this spectrum is basically separates the two ventricles, the left and right. It separates them. But if this is not fully developed, there's basically a hole or a space. Basically, this is not developed, and blood can be able to flow between these two ventricles, you know, deoxygenated and oxygenated blood, which we don't want, can be able to flow. And the question is, which way will blood likely travel? Well, going from the previous questions about, you know, the left side having to deal with pressure or higher pressure, and we feeling our heartbeat on our left side very strongly, I answer that blood will most likely flow to from the left to the right just because of that reason. But yes, and that is my video. Thank you.